Even though this is a Blueprints course, I want to go a bit about the Unreal Engine and the interface, because even though you are a programmer, you have to know a bit about the engine and how to work around. Sometimes the client wants you to add a light, or they want you to delete something, they want you to change some properties. And also when you're programming, you have to change some properties, and you have to know where in the engine you can find things. So to begin with, we can start to the top left. We have all of these default buttons that you have seen in other software too. So in File, here we can create a new level, we can open a new project, we can save the current project we have. And in Edit, the important thing is the editor preferences. So if you want to edit something inside of your editor, here is the preferences for it. I haven't worked too much inside of here, but you can see here that you can edit the editor to your liking. And we have the project settings. Inside of the project settings, you will be working a lot, and we will get to it later on too. But inside of here, for example, you can change the game mode that you're working on. We will get to that later. And you can change the movie for when your game starts up. This is the packaging settings for when you're finished with your game, and description and so on. So a lot of settings that you have to work with when you're making a video game. The next thing is the plugins. Inside of the plugins, you can see that you can enable and disable a lot of plugins. And the most important thing for me when I start a project is inside of the virtual reality. I usually always disable Oculus VR and disable the Steam VR when I create a new project, because when you put this game on Steam and it's not a VR game, it will open in VR mode for some reason, which it did for Farmtale when I released my game on Steam. It usually opened on VR even though it wasn't a VR game. So I usually disable those and restart the engine. But for now, you don't have to do this. We're not really going to need to disable them, but I just did so you could see it. Okay, and the next thing is window. Inside of here, you can open multiple windows if you wish to. For example, you can see here we have a details panel. Inside of Windows, details, you can open a second details panel. And you can see here, these are actually the same windows. So if I click something inside of the viewport, you can see that the same information is displayed both places. So inside of window, you can open multiple windows, and this is very useful if you have multiple screens. So for example, I can pull this to my second screen and I can work there. We don't have more important things inside of Windows for now. Inside of tools, we will skip this for now. Inside of build, we will skip this for now. And in help, you can read about the documentation of Unreal Engine. The next thing is down here, we have a save button. Inside of the create button, this is important too. Here you can create different assets. For example, lights. If you click on point light, you can see that you have created a point light. I'm going to delete it again by pressing the delete button on my keyboard. And inside of the create, you have shapes. You can create a cube, sphere, cylinder, cone, plane. You can create cameras, visual effects, volumes. We'll get to that later. And these are all the classes that you can create. The content is, you can open a new content browser, and the content browser is actually down here. If you click this button, or if you click Control Space, this will make it pop up too. But if you click on content browsers, this is actually the same as this, so you have multiple windows for that too. Blueprints, this is actually what we're going to work with mainly. And inside of here, you can program the game. We can create a new blueprint class and open the level blueprint, which we'll work in later. Don't worry about it for now. And in cinematics, we're not going to touch. Here you can create cinematics. We have different tools here. We have the select tool, so you can select different things. We have the landscape tool, so you can create a landscape for your game. We have a foliage tool. Here you can place foliage, such as grass and vegetation, plants, so on. We have the mesh painting tool. So if you have a mesh like this one, the ground, you can paint on it if you have a texture. But don't worry about it for now. This is a blueprints course, not an artist course. We have the fracture tool. This is self-explanatory. And we have the brush editing tool. Over here, we have the play button. So if you click play, you can play the game you're currently working on. And so this we will use very much. If you click on the three dots beside it, you can open the game in a new editor instead of opening it inside of the viewport. And in platforms, here you can package your game to different platforms. And in the settings to the right, you can view the world settings. We'll get to that later. You can view the project settings, which we already did from up here. And you can also view the plugins that we already watched too. Okay, so I'll go back to the editing tool here. The next important thing is the details panel to the right. So in the details panel, you can see here different properties. So if you click on different things inside of the viewport, you can see that different details are displayed. And these are the details for the thing you have selected in your viewport. So if I select my ground mesh, you can see the different properties it has. It has the location where it is. It has the rotation, the scale. So for example, if I change this location, you can click and drag. You can see it changes the location. You can also just type a number. There are many settings such as physics, collision, the lighting, rendering, navigation, and so on. So here are all the details for the thing that you select, and there's of course different details for whatever you select. So if I select the lighting, you can see here I can change the intensity of the light. If I select the reflection sphere, I can change the brightness of it, the radius of it, and so on. So this is the details panel, and it's very important. We're going to work a lot with this detail panel. We have the world outliner, which you can see here to the right. If you click on the world outliner, this is actually what you have inside of the level you are currently working in. So for example, we have this ground mesh. If I click on this ground mesh and click on the world outliner, you can see here that I have selected this floor. And if I click on this one, this is the skylight. And if I click on the world outliner, you can see that I've selected the skylight. You can also select the different items inside of the viewport by clicking over here instead of the items over here. So if you click on them, you can see that it's selecting them inside of the viewport. So these are all the items that you have inside of your level. The world settings here, mainly we are going to change the game mode if we want to do anything in here. And this is for blueprints, don't worry about it for now. So we're not going to work much inside of the world settings for now. The last thing before we go inside of the viewport is the content drawer. So if you click on this button, or if you click Control Space, you will pop up the content drawer. Inside of this content drawer, you can see folders, and this is where all of your files will be for the game. So if you have a character or an enemy, an NPC, for example, if you have a model of a coin that you want to use in the game, all of these files are inside of here. And once you have the file inside of here, you can actually drag it inside of your level. So for example, I can have a health potion or a mana potion that I want to display here. I can drag it inside of my game. So here are all your files. What you can do is you can also create new folders by right clicking here. Create a new folder. You can right click the folder and also choose different colors for it if you like organizing things. So now you can have colors for your folders, and you can also add them to favorites if you wish to for easily accessing them. So I'm going to delete this new folder by clicking on either right clicking and delete, or I'm going to simply click delete on my keyboard. If you don't want to click Control and Space all the time to get this content drawer up, you can actually click on the content drawer and click Duck in Layout. This will duck the content browser. And actually it appeared up here for some reason. What you can do in Unreal Engine is you can actually click and drag the tabs to move them around. Or for this one, I'm just going to right click and click Restore Tab. And you can see here it's actually a tab now. But I want it down here just like the usual Unreal Engine, just like in Unreal Engine 4. So I'll drag it down and I'll put it down here. And I can downscale it so I have more space. So now you can work with this content browser as you wish instead of clicking on the content drawer all the time. And if you don't want this anyways, you can right click and click on close and you'll be back to where you started. But for this course, to make it easier for you to see it all the time, I'm just going to click Dock in Layout and have this appear all the time. Okay, so the last most important thing actually inside of the engine is the viewport. This is very important because here is what you will, this is where you will see your game. To navigate around inside of the viewport, you have to click and hold right click on the mouse button. You can see here that you can look around while doing that. While you're holding the right click, you can click on A, W, D, and S. So here you can move around in the viewport while you're holding the right mouse button. So you can see that you can move the mouse and move around, and it feels fairly awkward if you're not used to it. But if you're used to playing games, this feels very natural, just pressing A, W, D, and S while you're holding the right mouse button. You can also hold the left mouse button, and you can see that you can move around if you move the mouse. And I usually never use this. I actually never use it. So I usually just hold the right mouse button and move around when I'm working. You can also use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, or you can simply just move closer using holding the right mouse button and moving around. So this is the same thing. You can also move up and down by holding the left mouse button and the right mouse button, and can see here that I can move up and down. And again, I never use this, but this is there if you want to use it. And inside of the viewport, we have different buttons. We have this button, and inside of here, you can show the FPS. This is very important when you create your game, so you can see that your game is not lagging because it's unoptimized. You can actually also view different stats for when you're optimizing your game. We will not get inside of game optimization for now. You can change the field of view. You can also, very important, click on the game view. And what the game view is, you can see it hides all of the icons inside of the viewport. And this is pretty good for when you want to see your games without any of these icons in the view. So you can actually make them appear again by clicking on the game view, or you can press G. This is what I usually do. So if you see my icons appear and disappear, this is because I'm pressing G again and again. The next important thing is the immersive mode. So this will full screen the viewport, and this is pretty cool for when you want to see your game fully. So you can also access it by pressing F11. So F11 will minimize and maximize the viewport, and G will make the icons disappear. So now you can view your game without any of these annoying icons in your view. So I'll press G again, and I will press F11 to get back to the normal view. And the last thing in here I usually do is either create a camera. So if you want to create a camera where you are standing right now, you can click on create camera here and choose what kind of camera you want. You can also take a screenshot of what you're viewing right now. The next thing is you can change between the perspective modes. So for example, you can view the top view of your game. You want to change it to bottom 2, left, right. And this is pretty cool for when you want to place something very specifically. For example, if you want this in the middle, you can click on right, you can click on left, and also make sure it's in the middle and so on. Instead of trying to make it go inside of the middle through the perspective mode, then it's a lot easier to use these view modes. We have the lighting modes. So inside of these view modes, we have the lit, what we're currently in, and this views the game with the lighting that we currently have. We can also view the game without any lighting, and so you can see we have different view modes that we can use. Inside of the show, you can display and remove items that you don't want to see, for example, icons here. And to the right, very important, I'm actually going back to the lit mode. And to the right here, you have different tools you can select. This is the select tool. So this is going to select, or making us being able to select items inside of the viewport. We have the move tool. So here you can see pivot points appear. And when you drag the pivot points, you move them in these directions respectively. And so you can do that with all of the items inside of the level. If you click on the white ball in the middle, you can move it in all different directions. If you click on the square on either of these axes, you can move it in 2 different axes instead of 1. We have the rotate tool. So with the rotate tool, you can rotate the item. So if I click on the ground mesh and I click on here, you can see that it rotates it for the axis I've selected. The next thing is the scale tool. So with the scale tool, you can choose to scale it in different directions, or you can choose to click on the white square to make it scale uniformly. And what I usually do, and this is very important, is to use the keyboard for these tools. So it takes a long time to click on the move tool and then move the ground, and then you want to rotate it. You click on the rotate tool up here and you rotate it and so on. What's a lot easier to do is click on the Q if you want to choose the select tool. Click on W if you want to move, click on E if you want to rotate, and click on R if you want to scale. So Q, W, E, R. So for example, I click W to move it, I click E to rotate it, I click R to scale it down maybe this way, I can click W to move it again, and so on. The next thing is the snapping tools. So the snapping, you can see here, when I move this ground, it's not moving smoothly. This is because we have the snapping turned on, and right now it's snapping every 10 in the grid. So if I make it 50, you can see that it's snapping a lot more in a wider distance. So if I can disable this snapping by clicking on this icon here, and you can see it turns up white, and this is because it's not enabled anymore, and I can move the ground mesh smoothly. The same thing goes for the rotate. So if I rotate now, it rotates every 10 degrees. You can change it to another number, or you can disable it by clicking on the icon, and now you can rotate it smoothly. And this is the same thing with the rotate or the scale tool. Here you can change the camera speed. This is very important too. So if you want to work with something very close, you don't want to have a very quick camera. So what you want to do is reduce the camera speed, and now you can work with something very close. Or if you have a very huge world, you want to increase the camera speed so you can get around much quicker. And the last thing is these viewports. So if you click on this button, you can see all of the different viewports at the same time. So here we have the perspective view, we have the back view, right view, and the top view. And here you can work with the different views instead of only having one at a time. You can also maximize one of the viewports by clicking on this button here. And you can go back by clicking on the button again and maximize the viewport. Okay, and the final important thing is to save your work. You can simply click File and Save All, but for now I'm not going to do it because I don't really want to save this level. I just wanted to show you how to use the engine. We will create our own new level in the next lessons. So this was all of the important things inside of the engine. It's alright that you don't know everything. If you're fairly new to the engine, you'll get to know it step by step, but these are all the important steps to get you started. So let's go over to the next lesson and learn more about blueprints.